always support and coordinating this for all of us. And thank you for all the scholars for joining us and for your attention tonight. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you find this somewhat helpful and interesting. And we're here, just like Evan mentioned, if you have any questions offline, we're always here to answer any questions. So just to introduce ourselves and what we plan to do. So we're trying to do some educational workshops where we present some information. It's going to be a series of 4 workshops kind of every month, usually like 45 minutes to 1 hour. And we hope that by attending that we can engage you, get you a little bit more interested in healthcare careers, not just as physicians or doctors, but any careers. We realize that a lot of you are already in college, so you might already have a career pathway in mind, but hope to foster any interest that you do already have, and also hope to add to your understanding or whatever understanding you may have, answer any questions, and provide a little bit of information on our backgrounds and how we chose our careers, and also to give you any additional information on what other careers are out there. So let's introduce ourselves. My name is Tiffany Kilbis. I'm a 3rd-year family medicine resident here at Pomona Valley Hospital Medical Center.
Hi, everybody. I'm Millie Hathaway. I'm a 2nd year here at Pomona Valley.
And hello, I'm Alex. I'm one of the 2nd years here as well.
We're here in one of the call rooms at our residency. We were just trying to find space anywhere during COVID, so thanks for bearing with us.
Hello, this is Dr. Chiraboga. I'm the Community Medicine Track Director, and our residents here have a wealth of information to inspire you to seek a career in the healthcare field. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Chiraboga. So this is kind of a brief outline of the lecture that we put together today. So we want to tell you about our pathways in medicine, and they're kind of really different, I think, just amongst ourselves in the room, but even outside of that, as far as our residency is concerned, we have 24 residents here at Pomona Valley, and everyone's pathway has been really different, but we hope that you can see that you can come from any background, and there's a number of ways to get where you're going, and we just hope to demonstrate that for you. So we want to tell you how to prepare for medical school, if that's what you're interested in, provide you with some additional resources, touch briefly on residency, and then talk about other careers in medicine that you may not know about.
All right. So part 1, so we're going to talk about our own pathways to medicine. Here we have just us 3. If you can't have a good look of us here on video, but these are all 3 of us. Myself here on the left, Dr. Kilbis in the middle, and then Dr. Cruz on the right. And then I'll give it back to Dr. Kilbis to talk about her little pathway.
Sure. So yeah, I grew up here really locally in Southern California, just up the street from Pomona, so in Claremont, California. I went to undergraduate at Cal State LA, which is just outside of East LA. I studied biochemistry there, and I feel like a lot of times the majority of people that go to med school come from UCs. So I think there's sometimes additional support at UCs, and coming from a Cal State, I think there's a smaller population of pre-meds, but I did do a lot of volunteering in clinical settings, and participated in a lot of college clubs for leadership kind of experience, which they want you to have. I did some research in biochemistry, and I took the MCAT one time. I wasn't sure that I wanted to go to med school, so I wasn't one of those people that was like thinking from a young age, oh, I know I want to be a doctor. I thought I wanted to be a vet, which I guess, it's still medicine to some degree, but definitely during my clinical volunteering in college, and also interest in just sciences, I think that's where my interest grew in medicine. So I took some time off after college. So I worked for a few years at different jobs. My first job was at One Legacy, which is an organ procurement organization and tissue bank. And then I worked as a project manager and actually an IT startup. So then I went to medical school. I went to an osteopathic medical school, which some of you may have heard of and others may not have, but it's basically the counterpart of like traditional MD schools. 4 years, and a lot of the training is pretty much the same. We take the same exams now, but we have additional training, which is like hands-on osteopathic manipulative medicine, and the philosophy a little bit different. So focusing on whole body approach and holistic, taking into account not only the physical kind of derangements and derangements in lab values, but also things going outside of such as religion and mental health and those types of things that all contribute to a patient's well-being. And here I am doing my residency in family medicine at Pomona Valley. So this is my 3rd year. Have about 7 months before finishing up. And then where I go from here, well, that's still a question mark, but I do want to do like inpatient medicine primarily and probably teaching. So maybe academic medicine. I'll hand it over to Dr. Hathaway.
Thank you. All right. So I am originally from San Francisco. I was born and raised up there. I had spent all of my life up in the Bay Area, all the way up until medical school. But to give you a little bit of background, I was, as far as I can remember, always interested in medicine. I owe that to my mom being a nurse, and my sister also in healthcare. She also is a doctor as well. So I was exposed to my family being sick as well. So that was kind of where it all rooted from. And just right off the bat, I had always wanted to become a doctor, but didn't realize until later on that the path to medicine doesn't always have to be straight. I, speaking from my own background, I took a windy road to find my way to medical school. So in high school, I knew that if I wanted to go into healthcare, biology was one of the recommended majors. So that's what I ended up majoring in. I went to Dominican University. It's a really small college, about an hour north of San Francisco. I actually took the MCAT, which is one of the admissions tests prior to going into medical school and applying to medical school. I took it 3 times. So we can talk a little bit about the MCAT later on. We have slides on it. And then I applied to medical school right after college and I didn't get in. So I worked a little bit. I worked for about a year as a lab manager in the chemistry department at University of San Francisco. And when I didn't get into med school, to be very honest, I said, okay, what do I really need to do to strengthen my application? And also, to be very honest, I questioned, do I still want to do this? Is this still something I want to do? And volunteering while I was working, I volunteered at a free clinic in my local neighborhood, and that really reaffirmed my reason why I still wanted to go to medical school. So I said I was really interested in learning more about underserved groups and the underserved population, particularly in the Bay Area. So I did a public health program at Touro University in Vallejo. It's about an hour northeast of San Francisco. And I did that for about 2 years. And I would say that was one of the most formative experiences for me in terms of really defining my reason of wanting to be a doctor. I worked with a lot of underserved, undocumented immigrant groups while I was working in Vallejo, and then subsequently for my field study in San Francisco, back at that clinic that I volunteered in before I went into the public health program. So I reapplied to medical school, thankfully got in, and I also went to Western University like Dr. Kilbis did. And now here I am as a second year, still not quite sure where I'd like to go after residency, but thinking about working still with the underserved population and possibly going into adolescent medicine. I'll give it to Dr. Cruz. That's me.
Dr. Hathaway, and that's me. So I took a different path. I grew up here, East LA. I went to Sher High School, Montebello. I went to private Whittier College. There, it was just the same pathway of just looking up at different prerequisites. And all of them always end up just saying you do biology or chemistry. So I was double majoring for some time and thinking of maybe just doing biochemistry. But in the end, I just ended up doing biology and just minoring in chemistry. I looked for other opportunities because growing up, I wanted to do medicine, because of my uncles, but I also wanted to do research. And so I was always tied up in between either doing a PhD or going for the MD. And there's certain programs that help you, especially for undergrad. It's one of them is here in LA with the NIH partnership, and it's 12 weeks of research. And that's what I did in between to figure out while I was working on my medical applications and just getting more volunteer hours. I ended up just taking the MCAT once, but decided to go the international route and go to Mexico. And so that's another different opportunity there. The first 2 years are in English, and then you come back to the US to do your clinical rotations. And the thing is that once you graduate from there, you have to take still the US exams and get certified, which is an extra step. And that's something else that's like a different road to getting into medicine. But so far it's just been just getting hours, especially with volunteering. That's the biggest thing that you can do. And that's what I did a lot with small little clinics around Whittier, which is just a very quiet area, similar here to like Pomona has some areas. And so those are different pathways that we can do. And so we'll kind of go a little bit into now, like what are your thoughts about going into any career in medicine? And so one of the first ones is just your passion or being empathetic to helping those in need. So one for me, coming in for underserved community in East LA, that was one thing that I did want to help out others just like myself. The other one is problem solving, critical thinking, and learning. Because in medicine, you're constantly learning. We don't know everything. Every year, there's more research, more things that are coming up. And so we have to constantly be reading and being on top of that. Good communication skills is just very given, especially with medicine. You're always communicating with the patient, with patients' families. And so you need to be able to come across to both and explain any complex things to them in a more lower level where it's not overwhelming for them. And the other one is if you have any interest on new or ongoing developments in medicine or other sciences, it kind of goes on with the critical thinking problem and learning because it's constantly changing. And so it's things that you could even contribute yourself.
I see that Evan has posed some questions for us in the chat there. And so like he mentioned earlier on, if you have any questions, throughout the presentation or have any comments or just wanted to chime in, please feel free. Don't be shy. We really want this to be for you and for you to get the most out of it. So you don't have to answer out loud. You can also put it there in the chat if you feel more comfortable. Next one. Okay, so preparation in college, what can you do now? So as Evan mentioned and Dr. Kilvis mentioned, you all are in college and you may have an idea of what you want to do, but if you wanted to go into medicine specifically, these are some of the requirements that are posted, and it's standardized throughout medical schools, both MDs and DOs. So it's attending a 4-year university or a community college and then transferring into a 4-year university. So they do require a bachelor's degree, whether that's a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. And then it says here, they like to see that you have a balanced and well-rounded transcript. And what that really means is when you do majors like biology and chemistry, those are very science heavy. And of course, those are courses that are going to help you, one, prepare for the MCAT, but then also they really build your knowledge base for the heavy science-based courses that you'll be taking in medical school. But when they say well-rounded, the med school boards, they also like to see that you take other classes that are not science heavy, whether that's humanities, history, arts, and other social sciences like psychiatry, sociology, things like that, just so that they see that you understand kind of a more worldly view, not just really science robust thinking. And then it says here you can choose any major to apply to med school. And this is true. And so what's really common, and this doesn't happen to everybody, is that those who go into medicine choose a very science major, like biology or chemistry, like we said. And that's because the prerequisites and the courses that are required for graduation in that major are also the ones that are prerequisites and requirements for medical school. But I had some classmates in medical school that did not that number one did not major in a really science heavy major. I had one that majored in history actually, and so the parallel to that is in addition to taking those classes that are catered to her history major, she in addition had to do all of the med school prerequisites. So there is that. It's good to keep that in mind as well. Oh, right. So we talked a little bit about this already. And so the idea of taking these courses here on the second bullet point, the ones that are bolded, biology 1 year, general chemistry with a lab 1 year, organic chemistry with a lab 1 year, and then biochem and physics, and then 1 year of English. So these are most of the hardcore requirements, and these are the ones that would be important in terms of fostering your knowledge base for the MCAT, and then as well as your introductory courses in med school. So they really want you to show that you'll succeed in these types of concepts. And it's supposed to kind of give you the idea of the actual workload and the demand of med school. And so these are just general requirements, but it's also good to take a look at specific school requirements if you have some certain schools in mind already.
Hi, guys. So I'm just going to open up the chat since some of you are replying to Evan's question there. So I hope you guys don't mind, but Daisy mentioned that she had a good pediatrician growing up. And she looked at her, also enjoyed being with children and interacting with them one-on-one and learning about the body and science. So I think those are all great things. Knowing that you really like a certain population early on, that's helpful. And that might change as you go through like your training and different exposures. But I think most people that end up in medicine have some mentor or someone that they've seen and they kind of thought, oh man, they really helped me out, or I really liked what they did and I want to be like that when I grow up. So cool. And then Maria said she likes science and wants to help people hands-on. Yeah, that was kind of how I felt. Like I really enjoyed science. And like Dr. Cruz had mentioned, kind of between going into a PhD route or research versus going into medicine. But I think medicine kind of gives you the both of both worlds, where you're not doing like you're not in a lab all the time and you get to interact with people and you get to see kind of your direct impact on them on a day-to-day basis and see them get better, which is really nice while still doing science. Yeah, so thank you both for sharing. Really appreciate it. And so some other things that you can do to kind of help boost your application and show that you're interested in medicine. Not necessarily have to, but sometimes people do get certified as an EMT or volunteer for an ambulance company. That's a great way to get hands-on patient experience really early on in your training. I'm not sure what the exact requirements are for EMT, but I think they're kind of doable during college. And so that's one way to do it. I would encourage you also to, if you are very interested, to reach out to your specific at your college. They should have some advisors and people that can help you kind of identify maybe volunteer programs in your own community or that are linked with your college that are directly related to healthcare. Research and shadowing. So yeah, when Dr. Hathaway kind of talked about a well-rounded application, so they want you to have not only the academics, like a good GPA and MCAT score that show your medical knowledge and that you're able to kind of balance the heavy course load and still get good grades and retain things, but they want to see that you're interested in medicine in other ways. So other ways to show that is going to be, yeah, through things hands-on patient care, like we talked about. Other ways, research. So that shows your interest in science and kind of moving the scientific field forward and progressing things. So usually most colleges do some research in some capacity. It may or may not be clinical if it's not affiliated with like a medical school, but sitting down and reaching out to different faculty in the science department is a good way to get involved in research, especially if you know some of them are doing research. I think most of them are really eager to have help with that. And that's always something good to go on your resume, even if you don't go into medicine. Shadowing opportunities. So one, that's a great idea just to get an idea of what your day-to-day might actually look like, seeing different specialists, but also again, just to show your interest and gain exposure in medicine. Okay, so here is a specific program that you can see from Ventura County Medical Center. So this is a summer scholars program. And this is, it looks like an 8-week opportunity. So that's something that you can research if you're in the local area. And there's other summer programs. Again, just reach out to your specific institution or do a quick like Google search. And then touch base if you know that you want to stay in a specific area or you're really interested in a certain medical school. You can always reach out to them too, and show that you're interested in and ask them if they have any specific opportunities or volunteering programs that they may recommend or connect you with. So here are just some links. If you guys want them, we can send these to you in a separate email or share them with Evan as well, who can share them with you. But these are various different research programs as well as volunteer programs. And you can check them out for the individual details. But there's Ventura listed there, UCLA, Healthcare Connection, NIH, which I think is the one that Dr. Cruz mentioned. So this is to increase like minority participation, I think, in like in the hard sciences and research specifically. Okay, and pass to medical school.
And so just kind of going through the chat as well. Who is Angie just mentioned a little bit about not sure she wants to go indirectly into medicine, but wants to work with nursing. And so that's actually encompassing the different paths of medicine. It doesn't necessarily have to be medical school, because in medicine, it's just about a whole team. Necessarily, there's a physician working, there's a nursing, especially in the hospital, there's different routes as well. There's PAs, there's nurse practitioners, RTs, and everyone works together, especially to coordinate patient care. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something rigid. And so here we have a little bit of different paths. Most of them require a bachelor, so let's do 4 years of college. Then you also have some different paths that lead after college. The way I went, international medical school. Here are some other residents who have graduated in the past, do the Caribbean school, go to the Cuban school in LAM, or for myself in Mexico. Like Dr. Hathaway went, she did her master's in public health. There's also other options of just doing a post-bac after, and it does help meet some of the medical school requirements, increasing your GPA. There's those that go into working, either medical assistant to get more exposure, EMTs, how Dr. Kilbas had mentioned, those who are volunteering already with EMT services, they might get certified or working for a couple of years, and you're getting clinical experience. And then there's the other option as well as research. You're providing some knowledge base for like medical field, but you're just working in the lab. And so that could help expire a little bit more. And so just like with everyone did at least something prior to medical school, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a straight path. There's also times where you're just working, trying to catch up and make sure that you're still focused on what you want. And so that's where volunteer definitely helps, because you can see exactly what the day-to-day is, how Dr. Kill was mentioned. And so then we're going to talk a bit about the MCAT. And so the MCAT has been changing throughout the years. Initially, when I took it, it was just a 2-score report. And it didn't really have a lot of the social sciences, which now they changed it to a 3-score report system. And they're incorporating a little bit more of the social sciences. They have more now sociology, psychology. They still have a little portion of the essay component where they want to see your critical thinking. It's a 1-day exam, tends to be about 6 hours. And here it has the different components. And so, like I mentioned, it has the core sciences, which Dr. Kilbas and Dr. Hathaway went over, which are all part of the medical school prerequisites. And so you're learning by taking those courses, you're prepping, but now it's incorporating a little bit of social ones. There's different resources that can help you. A lot of it is once you fulfill the medical school prerequisites, that's when you start reviewing, kind of solidifying all of that knowledge together towards it. The biggest thing is there's certain question banks that you can purchase to help you study. I know Kaplan has a couple that they do sometimes for free, and you could just Google those. It's very limited. They do offer sometimes certain fee waivers for some of these, but all these programs are all designed to help you just do questions and review all the material so you are prepared on the day of the exam. And so here, as a fee assistant program, there's a little link that we could also send to Evan to send out to you guys when you're applying. And with this, a fee assistant, they also help out with medical school applications, because that can also add up when you're applying, especially if you're applying throughout the whole US or certain regions that you want to get into. It can start getting a little costly.
And then just off the record, I know that I said that I took the MCAT 3 times, and I just wanted to provide some encouragement for people who struggle in terms of taking tests and just overall in the application process, because I definitely was one of them. So of course, when you hear about the MCAT, one of the first few things that you think about are, okay, what's the recommended score? What's the average score? And each medical school has their own kind of demographic on what the average MCAT score they have accepted in the most recent years is. And so what I wanted to say is I took the MCAT 3 times because I didn't do well in my first 2 times, and I did pretty average in my 3rd round. And so I'm here to just really give you encouragement that if applying to medical school is really what you want to do, just don't give up. What I had to really do is come out of my comfort zone and really try to figure out what my test taking limitations were, and how to study best for these types of standardized tests. And so on the previous slide, it goes over a range of available resources like review books, review courses, but some of the things that I also found to be helpful that weren't on the slide are back then there were a lot of blogs and forums that actually helped in terms of discipline on your own if you didn't want to do the courses and pay the money to do the course. And there are numerous amounts of schedules online that you could mimic if you wanted to do all of this on your own, in terms of how many review topics to cover in a day, when you should take your practice test, things like that. So just putting it out there also. And then just making sure in terms of the global picture, when you take the MCAT, it's a score. It is an important score, but schools don't just look at the MCAT. They really do try to see everything and you as a whole person, not just as a score, but of course, your letters of recommendation, your personal statement, your CV. It really shows you as who you are. So just to put that out there also. Okay. So how much does med school really cost? And these are a few years back, but it covers back in 2018, 2019, the different tuition and cost of attendance numbers for both public schools and private schools. And so this is kind of just an estimate ballpark. And these are big numbers. So I also don't want to discourage you with that because there are a range of different methods to finance and pay for medical school. And we'll talk a little bit about that in each of the next slides here. But for the public schools, the median tuition for med school is about 40,000. And of course, every year this number does go up, as does most things with inflation. And then private schools, a little bit more expensive. It's $61,000, around $60-ish thousand. And so the cost of attendance does increase because this includes not only just tuition, but then any other supplies or equipment. Whether or not this includes like cost of living or living expenses. And so it kind of gives the 4-year estimate of what paying for medical school looks like. And it's around 250 to 350,000, just ballparking. And to kind of give an average or an estimate, this is among all of the people who go to medical school, this is pretty average. And so a lot of people turn to different ways to finance medical school because it is a significant amount. How do I pay for medical school? So that's what we were saying. And the little quote here is from a financial aid and student director at a medical school here in the US in South Carolina. And it says anyone who graduates and gets a residency will be able to repay their debt. And they're kind of referring to the fact that it's really not uncommon to get loans to pay for medical school. And it's just another example of not having the cost or not having the finance behind medical school really change your decision on whether or not to apply.
So like Dr. Hathaway was mentioning, there are various things to pay for medical school. Some of them happen while you're in school and some of them happen after you graduate. So some examples, things that you can qualify while you're in school. So there's different scholarships available. Some are like more like federal, National Health Service Corps, and some are institutional. So they're specific to your individual medical school. So recommendations for that is inquiring early on because some of them require specific things to be completed to be considered, and you may need to do them while you're in school. And then there's a bunch of different things located on AFP. So that's a link there to give some idea about the debt funding and different scholarships that are available. Student loans, I think the overwhelming majority, unless their families are, pretty well off and can fund them during medical school because of the extensive expense, do end up taking student loans. So there's private and then there's federal. And in order to qualify for the federal, you complete a FAFSA. So that will determine your need and kind of your loan amount. Most people don't have too many issues qualifying for loans while they're in medical school. Typically, these are at a lower interest rate than private loans, and there are special considerations and special loan repayment programs that you can enroll in for federal loans. And those may be based on your employer after medical school. So if you work for a non-for-profit, for example, eventually the loan will, the remainder of the balance on the loan after a certain number of on-time payments will be forgiven. And there's other perks for various loans that are available through federal loans. So that's kind of one of the things that we mentioned. So after graduation, the public service loan forgiveness, basically what that is, I want to get too bogged into the details of all these specific loan forgiveness programs because that's really way out in the future. But I think the important thing to take away is just knowing that there are various ways that you can have your loans forgiven after some commitment, and that once people do finish medical school successfully and have a job, they're able to repay their loans and still have a pretty decent living and we know without struggling too much to pay bills and things like that. But some of the examples here, the federal loan forgiveness. So that's again, after you pay a certain number of on-time payments for certain employers that qualify, your loans will be forgiven by the government. Military service. So if you enroll in a military service, you're required to do a certain commitment of active service after you finish medical school to repay your commitment, and then they'll pay off the remainder of your loan and specific state loan forgiveness programs as well. So if you talk a little bit about residency. So residency is the training that comes after medical school. Everyone now is required to complete residency to be board certified and to get a full-fledged license. So it focuses on your specialty, and there are so many different specialties. I think the shortest is we're one of the shortest, so family medicine or internal medicine, which is 3 years, and it kind of goes up from there. You apply an interview usually at the very end of medical school. So in your 4th year, after you've had an opportunity to go through your various clerkships or rotations, there's some core ones that you do during medical school that try to give you an overview of what they kind of consider bread and butter type specialties. And as I mentioned, the shortest is 3 and up to the top 7. And then there's hybrid of training depending on your specialty. You'll spend some time in the hospital or the clinic, and most likely some combination of both. And at this time, well, we're kind of like doctors with training wheels. So we get to see our patients, we get to participate in their care. We, write prescriptions for medications. And I think as you go through residency, your autonomy and independence grows. So when you're an intern, you're reporting to a senior resident, and the senior resident is reporting to an attending. And as an intern, you're kind of everything you do is kind of seen before you do it and approved. And then gradually, as you're going through residency, you're able to act a little bit more independently, but there's always someone there to provide support and answer questions and give you a lot of teaching during residency. So that's the time that you really grow to be an independent doctor. So to talk a little bit more about specifically our training program here at Dr. Cruz.
So here at Pomona Valley, it's 3 years, how Dr. Kilba said. And so we are family medicine, and so we are full spectrum, meaning that we do from mom being pregnant to the delivery. Then we take over and we also care for the newborn and pediatrics. We also care for adults. And if they get hospitalized, we do rotations here, which is internal medicine. And we also do our geriatrics. So we see everyone from all forms. And so obstetrics and gynecology is specifically when conception occurs up until delivery. You will deliver. And there's here at Pomona, we're able to actually help assist with cesarean sections if it ends up being a cesarean section or natural delivery. With gynecology, we also have a rotation here, and that encompasses of more just general pathologies or even procedures for birth control, doing just regular routine checkups. Then with our pediatrics, it's just our newborns up until the age of 18 for us here, but we continue to see them as adults as well. There's also different residencies for pediatrics, and those range between 18 to 21-year-olds with their max, depending on their training on their facilities. But it's also a 3-year residency. Kind of going back a little bit with obstetrics and gynecology, you could also just specialize in that. And that's a separate specialty, and it's 4 years. And sometimes even 5 if there's a research year included or extra training. But for us, it's just very limited here to just the 3 years, and we can even do fellowships afterwards to continue practicing that. We also do a lot of procedures here in our procedure clinic. We have our musculoskeletal clinic where we're seeing a lot of knee complaints or ankles or even shoulders, and we could even do injections to help alleviate a lot of the pain. We have our gyne procedure clinic We also have our dermatology clinic, and so we're able to do skin tag removals, looking at different warts and freeze them as well. Internal medicine is also part of what's called inpatient or hospital medicine. And so that's also a 3-year residency program, but here it's part of our curriculum as well. And so you're learning on anyone who comes in sick, you stabilize them, and you're working with the team, you're caring for them. And so you're trying to see, making sure that they get better. And so family medicine tends to do continuity of care where once they're hospitalized, we're able to see them in the clinic as well. And so we know what happened during the hospital course. While if you're in internal medicine residency, you would just work solely when they're here hospitalized. And when they get discharged, either they go back to their primary care physician. And so sometimes that continuity care is a little bit lost because they're not aware of everything that occurred. And sometimes they might be able to have some of continuity. Then geriatrics, those are our 65-year or older patients. Here, we're able to actually go to skilled nursing facilities as well as part of our curriculum. And we care for patients there. And so the nurses there at those facilities will contact us if there's anything with our patients that we need to see. We work with our attendings, our supervisor physician, who we kind of talk about their care and see if anything needs to be managed there, or that's when we send them into the hospital for further management. And we're working with the community a lot. We do have specialty tracks here, and one of them is community medicine, which we're part of here, and we're also incorporating street medicine as well. And that's one of the biggest projects, at least here at Pomona, that we're trying to expand, start getting a little bit more outreach and working with the community, and helping those the homeless, those underserved communities where they might not have enough resources, see what we can help out with. And so let's look at the chat before we go to the next one. So here, medical path is for bioengineering. So I'm highly considering entering medical field. This is from Evelyn. So yeah, with bioengineering, there's different opportunities, especially with cancer research right now, which the nano particles that are coming out and helping out target specific receptors. So there's definitely a lot of things that can contribute, not necessarily just going into that path. A lot of mathematician physics is required with that. And so everyone is, as a group, contributing further for the medical field. And here is just a little average of what a physician will make depending on the specialties. And so like how Dr. Hathaway was saying, with the cost for applying for medical school, you start seeing the debt kind of grow. And here it looks like on which different specialty you want to go into, especially those that you want to help out. You know, you'll eventually have the income to be able to pay back your debt. And so along with plastic surgery here being a little bit of the highest compensated one, they also have a higher liability insurance to pay as well. And that's the reason why they make a little bit more, because you're taking care of something and it's either for cosmetic reason or a newborn with a palate that you want to repair. There's always a higher risk because you're dealing with more than just one patient. You're dealing also with the family. There's also other careers, how we mentioned earlier, physician assistant, a registered nurse, nurse practitioner, physical therapy, respiratory therapy. There's also the EMTs, everyone there that's working together. And those are all right now, California passed for physician assistants and nurse practitioners. And so now they're still being supervised by physicians and they're working together with the team, but now they're in primary care, they're able to help expand. Because one of the things is there's a shortage of family medicine doctors or just doctors in general, because people are not going into the field. And so as the population grows, they still need to be seen by doctors later on. when they start getting sick. And so with these other career paths, they're able to help and manage instead of in a clinic for a half day right now. Second years, we're seeing 8 to 9. As a third year, you're seeing 10 to 13. And that definitely helps if you have in a private setting, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, registered nurse, because you can see those 13, but they can see another 13. And so now in a half day, you're seeing 26 patients. And so this helps to offload a lot of that patient population.
So we have a couple of slides here on some of those healthcare providers as well. So physician's assistant, that's a PA. So what is a PA? And then so they are considered advanced practitioners who, like physicians, diagnose and treat a range of medical conditions. They are also able to prescribe medications. And in terms of scope, you know, they can also participate in surgeries, procedures, and both in the inpatient setting and in the outpatient setting. So where it says here they work in a variety of specialties. And so if I could compare and contrast a little bit in terms of specialties from a PA to a physician, a physician is required to choose a specialty, and that's what we are trained in our residency. As a physician's assistant, one of the really cool and diverse ways that you can participate in medical care is you could jump around from different specialties. So for example, I have a couple of PA friends. One is doing ortho, another is doing urgent care, another is doing cardiothoracic surgery. So they said that, you know, in the next couple of years, when they want to switch specialties, they're able to do that. And I think that that is actually pretty great, because if you're the type of person that wants to learn different specialties and work with different types of disciplines, then that's an option for you. Okay, so how do you become a PA? So PA programs are mostly 2 to 3. So 2 is an accelerated program. Most are 3-year programs after you finish college. And those typically require you to also have a 4-year degree as well, so a bachelor's. And then some prerequisites include similar ones to going into medicine, anatomy, biology, chemistry, and then they actually require a significant amount of patient care. So what I mean by that is a lot of PA schools have certain hour requirements that you have been or you have participated in direct patient care. So whether that is being a nursing assistant, a medical assistant, an EMT, where you actually are participating in the patient's care and coordinating their care. So if you're interested in becoming a PA, I think that's something to keep in mind in terms of looking at the programs you're interested in, because that hour requirement can change from program to program. And then in terms of any standardized testing that they require before admission, it really just depends. And so it's not as standardized from program to program. So this is where I would highly recommend doing more research and being a little bit more organized in terms of paying attention to the details of the application process, because it does change from program to program. So for example, some schools will require the GRE, which is the graduate records exam, or the MCAT, which is the medical school required exam. And then in terms of salary, it really does vary depending on your location, depending on your specialty. So on average, PAs will make between $90,000 to $150,000. Okay. And then registered nurse, so an RN. So what is an RN? So they are very important members of the healthcare team who directly are in charge of the patient's day-to-day care all throughout the day. So administering medications, taking their vital signs, and vital signs, what I mean is like their blood pressure, what their heart rate is, what their breathing rate is, what their temperature is. And so they become really, really critical in terms of monitoring how the patient is doing, their progress throughout either if they're in the clinic setting or in the hospital. They're also a really critical member of the team who spends a lot of time with the patient, especially on the when they're admitted in the hospital. That's what we mean by the inpatient setting, and patients and their families. And so what we mean by that is in terms of coordinating their care, they're kind of the key member who can advocate for the patient because they have spent so much time taking care of the patient and really getting to know them. And again, they work in a variety of specialties. And so in the outpatient or clinic setting, that's the ambulatory specialty. And those can range from primary care to any of the outpatient specialties. Internal medicine, they'll have nurses as well. And they typically supervise in the outpatient setting, supervise other medical staff like medical assistants or LVNs, licensed vocational nurses. And in the hospital, they can work in different departments, whether that's the emergency room and surgery, and then those taking care of patients on the wards if they're sick enough to be admitted to the hospital. A key thing to note is that they cannot prescribe medications, they can administer them, but they do need a doctor's order to prescribe certain medications. All right. And how do you become an RN? So there are different routes. So there's a 2-year program, and those are usually associate's nursing degrees versus the 4-year program. Sometimes it's 3 years, so 3 to 4 year program, and that gains you the bachelor's of science and nursing degree. So an associate's or a bachelor's in nursing. The key difference is because with the BSN, you do get more training. So you are able to learn a little bit more skills. You can take on more leadership positions. And so subsequently, you get to earn more and you potentially have more career options in that sense. In terms of prerequisites to get into nursing school, some programs do require an entrance exam. And then you typically do take some of those science courses in college, like chemistry, biology, anatomy, and some math classes. And again, this is where it's important to make sure if you're eyeing a program to look at what their requirements are in terms of applying. And then salary. So registered nurses will make around 60,000 to 110,000 a year, depending on their specialty, the location, and their level of training. All right. Nurse practitioner. I'll turn it over to Dr. Killis.
Okay. All right, guys. Okay, so a nurse practitioner. What is a nurse practitioner? Similar to a scope of practice with a physician's assistant, where you can prescribe medications and operate generally under the license of a physician. But the goal of training, I guess, is a little bit different than when you think of a nurse who's kind of carrying out physician's orders. Nurse practitioners are generating their own assessment and plans and putting in their own orders. So again, they work in a variety of different specialties, similar to a physician assistant, but some states they are not required to work under the license of a physician and can work independently. So that's kind of a big difference. And I think, I can only speak to what I've heard, but there's a little bit difference in terms of philosophy in training, where there's different models of care and more nursing kind of background models. And the pathway to get to a nurse practitioner requires typically an RN degree. So there you go. How do you do it? Well, you become a registered nurse first. So bachelor's of science and nursing is preferred, but not always the requirement, meaning that some people do a 2-year degree. And then enrollment after completion of either bachelor's or associates in nursing, which is an additional 2-year requirement. And then the salary, again, this is the wide range and probably not all encompassing here what we had listed, but around 100 to 150,000, probably gone up a lot with all the stuff going on with COVID and demand and supply and those things, because people, healthcare providers really need it right now. PT. So what does a physical therapist do? Well, they help us out a lot here in the hospital, but they also do a lot of things in the outpatient setting, meaning patients that are not admitted, but they walk into the clinic. But they have various things. So they help rehabilitate people after stroke. So if they have deficits where maybe they're weak or their speech is slurred or they're having difficulty, well, that would be more like occupational therapy. But people with neurological deficits following an insult like a stroke or something like that, geriatrics, so our population who, are prone to just be kind of sitting around at home. Maybe they're not working anymore, so they get really deconditioned. This is important for them to get them up and moving around, to just for longevity, but also to prevent things like falls. But they also do some things that you may not have thought of, and I didn't think of before I came here to residency. So wound care, caring for really bad wounds, doing dressing changes and debridement, making sure they heal up nicely and are healthy and not infected. Cardio and pulmonary rehabilitation. So it's basically a supervised exercise program where they watch them kind of do graded activity and try to get them back into shape, especially specifically patients that suffer from certain morbidities like heart failure, or they may have had a heart attack, things like that. So physical therapy, most are 3 years. Prerequisites are listed here. So usually some of the sciences, and there's a salary. Again, this is probably not encompassing the whole range, but 60,000 to 100,000 a year. Respiratory therapist. Sorry, I don't mean to rush through these slides, but I just want to respect everyone's time here because we want to leave times for questions and to address anything that you guys want to talk about at the end. But respiratory therapist, so these have been really, really important here, especially during COVID. So they help us here in the hospital make sure that our patients are on the appropriate oxygen supplementation. You'll see if you go into medicine, but there's a whole variety of ways that people can get oxygen delivered to them. They also help us with like nebulizers and specific medications, specific to the respiratory system, but they do a whole bunch of other things too. So you can specialize in sleep disorders. So people you may have seen wear like a CPAP at night that have obstructive sleep apnea. Peds, neonatal care, so preemies and things like that. So training is somewhat variable, either associate's or bachelor's degree. And again, some prerequisites similar to the other careers in medicine, where there's some prerequisites in the hard sciences, and salary ranging between 50 to 80,000. But there's many more that we didn't talk about here, probably many, many more. But some of the additional ones that you can consider, like pharmacists, which even under pharmacists now is like a whole range of different careers, like from the ones that you see in CVS to people that work in a clinic to people that work here in the hospital. Ultrasound techs, phlebotomists, those are the people that help us draw labs here in the hospital, but also in clinics, and also working at labs where like a doctor will order a lab, they'll go there and they'll get their blood drawn. Diabetes educators, dentists, occupational therapists, so they help more on the fine movements and things associated with deficits, sometimes after strokes, but other things too, and home health aides. So career in medicine, it's a career of service. So it is a unique commitment. I think, especially in residency, I know we work longer hours than a lot of times people do after residency, but at the end of the day, we always remember that we're here for our patients, and we need to and they're relying on us for their well-being. So having that knowledge and knowing that that's what we're here to do kind of keeps you going. We're lifelong learners, so constantly, I think this is true for everything, but medicine especially, new things being discovered every day, and there's so much research that's going on, and it's a challenge to stay up to date and current. But again, knowing that we're serving our patients and we owe them the best care that's available and is up to date. So constantly reading, learning, going to seminars, refining your skills. Teamwork, we're working together always as a group, especially here in residency, because I think we probably all spend way more time here with each other than probably other people at home. But Even outside of that, you're always going to be working as part of a team, and everyone has their each individual role to support our patients. So that's with nurses, therapists, medical assistants, even the patient themselves, who's arguably the most important team member, as well as their family members. And I think one of their most rewarding things is knowing that you get to be a person that impacts the way that your patients live, their families, and largely your community. Being flexible. So depending on what special UT you go in, you may be called in the middle of the night if you're going to deliver a baby, or if you're on call and a really sick patient needs you. So just trying to remain flexible and knowing that there's always a lot of security. So healthcare providers are always going to be in high demand. And there's so many changes, and it's just continuing to be in demand. And most importantly, I think if you love what you do, you know, that old saying is true, where it doesn't really feel like work as much. So that's the most important thing, whatever it is, even if it's not in medicine or whatever it is something that you're really passionate about and you really, really do like. So let's see, is there anything in the chat going on? Nope, but Evan, yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. So just gonna open it up, and thank you all for your attendance today, and for listening to us and for taking the time. But when I like anybody, if you do have any specific questions or comments or anything, please feel free. And if you don't want to say it out loud, please type it in the chat.
We did have a couple of the students had to leave because they were about to start class, but they did want me to relay that they appreciated all the information that you all relayed to them, and that it was very helpful and important. So I wanted to get it across to you all, because we did have two that had class. But just like they said, if y'all have any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or type it up in the chat. We know that this was a lot of information, a lot of great information that was provided to all of you this evening. So if you think of something at a later date, I will be posting this as a recording. I'll also post the slides. That way you have access to everything. And then I'm also, if it's all right with our guests, I'll go ahead and post also their email addresses in case you all would like to follow up with them at another time. Maybe you don't have a question at this moment because a lot of information was relayed. But if you think of something later on this week, between now and the next time that we'll be providing these sessions for all of you, do reach out. We've taught you all in high school and in college the importance of networking, and this is a great way to go ahead and utilize those skills that you've already had or that we've helped you to increase that skill set. So I'm not quite sure if we do have those questions, but just in case, just have this stuff on your mind if it is something that you all are seriously considering, or like we said in the very beginning, if you've already started the process in maybe volunteering or taking your courses that are supporting you on your pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. As Evan mentioned, we're more than happy to get emails whenever you think of anything. For future reference, if you want to retake the MCAT, you have to wait a full year. So I'll pass this to Dr. Hathaway.
Okay. So I don't know if the application cycle has changed, but when I took it, you're able to actually take it up to 3 times in 1 year. However, there is a caveat to that because the amount of time it takes to have your score resulted does take some time. I'm not quite sure if they changed it now, but for me, I think I had to wait like about a month and a half. And so depending on when they release that score, it might kind of change your timeline. So what I mean by that is, for example, applications for medical school, they typically want you to submit them in the fall. And so if you want your MCAT score to be ready, it's always a good idea to have it ready by the time you're ready to submit your application, because some schools, they have their own kind of procedure and algorithm on whether or not they'll even review your application if your MCAT isn't up. So Technically, the MCAT allows you to take the test 3 times in a year, but other factors might change that, whether you want to adjust the time that you want to study, whether it's going to result in time for the next application cycle. So often, I haven't seen, myself included, too many people take the test more than twice a year. I don't know if your experiences have been different. Yeah, Dr. Cruz and Dr. Kilbus are saying their experience isn't really different, but
Yeah, and actually one of my friends is studying for the MCAT as well. And so she was saying a lot of it is try to have it done by May, especially because everyone tries taking it during the summer. And so spots start getting filled up right now because of COVID or this past 2 years. The Prometric Centers, which is where you take the MCAT, it's a place where you're supervised. You have to check in, you go through security. Those were very limited with spacing. And so it affected all of the standardized testings that are done at those facilities. And so spots started getting filled up now that things are going up again. And so that's one thing to also look for. Here in LA, there's one here in Diamond Bar, Rancho, and then there's the ones in LA. So you also want to consider that location. Make sure prior to the test date, know where it's at, where you could park, have snacks ready. For the MCAT, I'm not sure you have actual break time allotted. And so it's part of your exam time where you're going. And so just you have to start learning how to manage your time for those exams. See if you want to take midway through a break or where you start feeling that yourself that you need a little bit of energy, and so you might want to take your snack. You cannot eat during the test, but with your break is where you're able to go to the restroom as well.
of course, Daisy. Are there any other questions?
It doesn't seem like it, Dr. Hathaway. But like we said, we'll provide all that contact information and the recording and that and the slides for today. That way, if we had any scholars that want to watch this later on, they'll be able to watch it and have access to all the same information.
Awesome. Thank you so much.